All right, welcome everybody to our August Forgotten Grapes Wine Club virtual tasting. We are so excited to have Steve Mirassou, the founder, owner, and winemaker of Steven Kent Winery in Livermore with us today. We're going to be talking all things Cabernet Franc because that's what we've got to drink tonight, all Cabernet Franc. Before we do that, as always, if you have any questions, we're going to have everybody muted during the conversation. So if you have any questions or comments, food pairings that you want to throw out there, throw those into the chat, and we are happy to monitor that, and we'll throw those out as we get. We will point out Steve is out in the middle of nowhere, as he has alerted us. He is way up in Humboldt County at a big family weekend, an all guys family weekend that they do pre-harvest. So his internet has been working well so far, but if for some reason he ends up dropping out, I'm sure Allison and I can heartily fill in the blanks until he gets service reinstated up there.
Just don't move, Steven. Don't move.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got my tinfoil hat on right here. I'm all set.
Exactly. Perfect. With that, we always start by asking our guest, Stephen, what is the most memorable bottle of wine that you have ever opened?
That's a great question. There are a few of them that are very personal. I think probably the one that is still sort of harks back to, or harkens back to, for me, kind of the beginning of my wine career. And I wrote about this in my first book. My grandfather had given a bottle of Angelica, so a fortified dessert wine that was made from mission grapes, by a Rancho Cucamonga winery that doesn't exist anymore. And he had given this bottle to my father probably, I'm going to say 50 years ago, 60 years ago, something like that. And my father gave that bottle to me 30 years ago, right after we started Steven Kent Winery, founded in 1996. And it was a bottle that had already had a lot of age on it. And so when we opened it, it was kind of a brownish wine, a wine that had been oxidized, a wine that was probably, I don't know, 10% residual sugar or something. But it aromatically, it was just gorgeous. It was stropped leather, and it was thyme, and it was the careworn winemaker, and it was the guy who harvested the fruit, and everything about that wine spoke about the sort of what it takes to get grapes in and made into wine. And I remember we drank that bottle. I shared it with my tasting room team at a Christmas party, Steven Kent Christmas party. And then I had the bottle in my cellar for years afterward. And I would take the cap off every now and again and just smell it. And it brought back amazing memories. And it was important because of the connection between family generations.
Nice. That's an amazing story. We are letting people know about the order of the wines that we're going to be drinking through tonight.
Okay.
So we will be starting with the Blanc de Franc. Then we'll move on to the Rosé, then the 22 Cab Franc, and then finally the Elements. That's amazing. I have a couple of bottles of 100 and gosh, I think at this point it's like 108-year-old Madeira.
Yes.
That I have two in bottle and then one in a decanter, and the one in the decanter, it's still holding up nicely, and I have a little glass of it every Christmas Eve just as a reminder of everything that's come before. So I love the tie-in to the history. We do have a lot of our folks here who are in the Inland Empire. So do you remember the name of that Cucamonga winery?
So it was Rancho Philo was the name of the producer. And I don't think that I haven't done any kind of.
No, they still are. They're still around. Yeah, Rancho de Filo. They do a cream sherry now. That's what they're known for. And
very cool.
Every year their cream sherry gets like a double gold medal in either the Central Coast or one of the big wine competitions, because they're pretty much the only local cream sherry, but they do it so well. I have a couple of bottles of that.
Not that it should technically be called sherry, but
I know, if you want to, Allison always likes to get very technical about these things.
Well, not technical, but there are certain regions in California, very old ones, that are not assuming. It's that are famous for not following the respectful rules.
Yes.
There,
But
yes,
but if
yes.
you're grandfathered in
You can
and
be
rich are the
grandfathered in.
females.
Their
Exactly.
grandfather did because they didn't want to change the rules. That's why you can still get what is
Corbel,
it?
Corbel
Champagne.
champagne.
Corbel
Yes.
Yes.
champagne.
Or Wilson Creek almond champagne as well, which is,
Oh, which sounds
terrible on every
It's as
single
terrible
level.
as it sounds.
Yeah, it is. Perfect. So yeah, let's as we're enjoying this Blanc de Franc, we definitely want to get into how it's produced, because it is so unusual. We really want to start about your history. Obviously you have a very famous last name in the wine business. But you've kind of gone out and done your own thing. Really focused around this a cab initially, but now really kind of bringing Cab Franc to the forefront. So take us through how you got into wine, and we definitely want to hear about, I know you have a literary background as well, which I think is
I
interesting.
do. So, the literary background and the wine background sort of vied for attention, in opposite ways. They were pulling apart rather than bringing together, or when I was going off to college.
Mhm.
So I grew up in the South Bay, in Almaden and Los Gatos.
He
Went
means the north side of California, South Bay,
Yes,
not the Southern
yes,
California,
Not
South Bay.
Hermosa, not
correct.
Hermosa
Not
Redondo.
Hermosa. Yes,
Yes.
yes, San Jose. We'll just say San Jose. Yes, exactly. I'd forgotten about that.
It's like in Paso when you say I'm from the Valley, it means very different thing from LA versus here.
Exactly,
So yeah.
exactly. So the South Bay of Northern California, San Jose area, and the family winery had started back in 1854 on the east side of San Jose, up against the foothills. Reminds me a little bit of Livermore in a way, in terms of the way that the topography affects ripening and that kind of stuff. We can talk about that later. But I worked at the family winery as a kid, so I would work on bottling lines during the summer. I grew up in the southern, what was called Almaden, the south part of San Jose, and I would take 15, 20 minutes to get to the winery. People would drive me there. A guy who worked in the marketing department of the family winery would drive me to work every morning, and I would work on bottling lines, disgorging champagne when I was 13 or 14, and working in the shop and bottling lines, that kind of thing. And then I the unfortunate thing about the timing of my schooling at that point, elementary school and middle school and high school, was that I was always back in school before harvest started. So I never got a real chance to see harvest until I was an adult. And when I went off to college, my father left the family winery in 1984, started a small little brand in Livermore that doesn't exist anymore. But I decided that I went to school at George Washington University in DC. So I was going to get as far away from California as I could for a while. And I thought I was going to be a lawyer when I left. And it didn't come to pass. There's a lawyer in the family, one of my kids, but I fell under uh, the thrall of some great literature professors and ended up becoming majoring in American literature and then going to NYU for my master's in literature. So my thought process was I was going to teach college literature. I was going to write books. The family winery wasn't something that was particularly compelling for me until um, I got back from New York after about 10 years on the East Coast to California with a wife and two and a half kids, and kind of made a place in the wine business with my father and his partner at the time.
Interesting. So your dad kind of split from the family business and went off to Livermore to start a brand. Was there a specific reason he went to Livermore? Obviously, Livermore very important to you and your brand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. Back in that time, so this would have been the early to mid 80s.
Mhm.
My family has been, in California wine for 171 years now, or whatever it is. And you knew all the families kind of knew each other. So the Wente family, the Kincannon family, the Mirassou family all knew each other. My grandfather and great grandparents knew the great grandparents of Carl Wente, for instance, that kind of stuff. And my father had my father had left Mirassou. He was VP of sales for the brand. Didn't really want to get back in the wine business right away, but had a buddy of his who actually worked for him who wanted to have his own label. And so they started this label that they were negociant really for the most part. So they were buying wine from producers, from winemakers, and finishing the wine
Mhm.
and then putting it under their label. Carl or Eric Wente, Carl Wente's father, Eric Wente, uh, a friend of my dad said, "Hey, we can help you out with this. We've got kind of a sort of a turnkey solution for you. We've got administrative help for you if you need it. We've got production facilities if you need it." And having come out of the family winery and having no real production facility to go to, they decided to come up to Livermore. And I think it was probably 1988 or so that they got up to Livermore. And we've been there, the family. My father is still alive, but has been retired for a long time. And myself, and now my kids have been in Livermore since 1988. However, that's almost 40 years at this point in time.
Yeah. Wow. So you've really seen the area develop,
Yeah.
as, I mean, I imagine it was probably like a Cucamonga, kind of back in those early days where it was just a lot of grape growers who were sending their wines, down in the Central Valley to Gallo or over to Almaden or Palmaison or whoever it was. But you've really seen the industry sort of develop there.
Absolutely. Livermore is one of the oldest wine growing regions in California, and it really kind of the first great region.
Mhm.
We all know Bottle Shock. We all know the Judgment of Paris, which is a very dramatic and a very obviously a crucially important thing for the California wine business. 100 years prior to that, Livermore Valley had won the grand prize for white wine in the Paris Exposition tasting, which was sort of a worldwide wine tasting commemorating the completion of the Eiffel Tower construction.
Right.
And it was a Sauvignon Blanc Semillon dry
Mhm.
wine, not a
Yeah.
Sauterne. And that kind of started to push Livermore Valley ahead of other regions in terms of quality, especially with those two varieties. And there were 5,000 acres planted in Livermore before Prohibition. Post Prohibition, obviously, a lot of wineries go away, a lot of acreage gets pulled out. Livermore Valley now is about half that size, a little over 2,000 acres. 5,000 acres is really kind of the size we can be with the water availability that we have.
Right.
That usually is what is the crucial factor for how big a region can become, is how much access to water you have.
Right.
Um, Livermore is a too undiscovered gem. Let me put it,
Mhm.
if that makes any sense. It's an area that deserves more attention, not
Right.
only because it's beautiful, not only because there's really beginning to have a moving toward a critical mass in terms of focus on certain varieties,
Mhm.
um, focus on hospitality excellence, focus on quality of food, focusing on quality of experience, certainly focusing on quality of wine. Um, Livermore really has been a Wente dominated and Kincannon dominated appellation
Right.
forever. And the Wente family still is the largest wine producer in the valley by far. The Kincannon brand has not been family owned for decades at this point in time, and is going through some changes even now that I think are going to help put that brand um, back into a level of quality that it has had in the past as the sort of the founding winery for the Petit Syrah variety in Livermore.
Mhm.
Uh,
Stephen,
yeah,
Stephen with Concannon, I mean, because I've traveled to Livermore
yes, you
now
have the number of
twice,
times.
right?
Yes.
Question about that is I know Wente is big and they own a lot of acres. They're the largest grape growers in the area. Everyone else that I've met is relatively small or doesn't own vineyards. But Kincannon, I know that Darcy Kent and her husband just bought it. Does that come with a lot of vineyards, or is it just the name and the production that they got? Or is it as many vineyards as Wente has?
So I don't know exactly the number of acres, but it's in the hundreds. So it's certainly this by far the second largest
Yeah.
holder of vineyard property in Livermore. I think the Wentes are probably farming I'm going to say 1,000 acres, or maybe a little over 1,000 acres at this point in time. Probably a little bit more, like 1,200. The Kincannons probably are 200 or 300 acres. The Kincannon brand now, which, as you mentioned, is uh, owned by a group that includes the Darcy Kent and Almost Famous folks, wonderful friends of ours, and another family who have Cab Franc vineyards not far from Kincannon. They are far and away the two biggest producers. What's interesting about Livermore, and what's exciting in a way,
Bless
also
you.
scary in a way, is that UC Davis did a study recently, 3 or 4 years ago, about the viability of the wine business in Livermore,
Mhm.
looking at water, looking at just the viticultural characteristics of the valley, the quality of the valley, and they determined that they thought that Cab Franc and Sauvignon Blanc were the two varieties that should be focused on in Livermore, not only because they grow extraordinarily well there, but because, um, and this is especially true on the Cab Franc side, there's no other region that produces fruit that's as good as Livermore's fruit, and there's no other region that can claim ownership like Napa can claim ownership of Cabernet Sauvignon, or
Right.
the or
I mean,
Paso,
Lodi with old vines in,
right, or
there's certain,
Paso with their own varieties.
yeah,
Most of the great wine regions in the world are defined by or circumscribed by a limited number of grapes.
right.
Sometimes it's one, right? Or it's two, or just a small little basket of grapes.
But wouldn't most people think of Livermore for Petit Syrah?
Well, it's interesting. People have said that um, I have an aesthetic argument that in my sort of um, view of things would preclude Petit Syrah from being that kind of forerunner, or
Right.
not forerunner, um, sort of a lodestar for Livermore Valley in terms of variety. It's
Because it should be used more as a blending grape to fill in the blanks rather than a lead
Well,
grape
in a
itself.
way, yes. In a way, yes. But 100% Petit Sirah, and we've made some in the past as well, can be really interesting wines. They're just not particularly food friendly. They're
Right.
not particularly um, stylistically diverse. There's not as much complexity in Petit Sirah as there is in any of the Bordeaux varieties, in my opinion, especially Cab Franc. Um, there's an historical reason to talk about Petit Sirah, certainly, just as there is Cabernet Sauvignon with the Kincannon clones and Chardonnay with the Wente clones. Um, but when I think about what potentially can make a region important, is to focus on grapes that provide that aha moment. The
Mhm.
grapes that provide a lot of aha moments. Stylistically, you can make right bank Bordeaux. You can make Napa Valley versions of it if you wanted to. I don't advocate for that at all, but you can do it if you want. If you want to make Loire Valley wines that are lower in alcohol and that are black fruited and are root veggie on the finish,
High
wine,
pyrazine. Yeah.
high pyrazine, although coming down because global climate change is affecting, ripening effects there as well. Um, Livermore Valley, for me, and I've tasted a lot of Paso. I've been to the Cab Franc Masters events in Paso over the last number of years. We do Cab Franc-A-Palooza here in Livermore, and we have a lot of the Paso wineries coming up to join us. Um, I admire the fact that they have gotten together as a group and really are beginning to push
Mhm.
that grape. Any mention of Cab Franc, any tasting of Cab Franc is a great day. Livermore, the advocacy for Cab Franc for Livermore is, I've been pushing this for 10 plus years at this point in time. We've been making Cab Franc for nearly 20 years in Livermore. Um, it's the right grape and the right climate, the right viticultural qualities, the right microclimates, the right mindset, the right amount of love. I hope the right amount of energy to continue telling the story over and over again. And I think just ends up with beautiful wines.
Yeah. And um, two things. First, I want to posit that Cab Franc from Paso Robles is almost an entirely different beast than Cab Franc from Livermore, other places,
No
which we can get
question.
into in terms of late ripeness,
Right.
letting it hang for longer periods. But what I really want to double click down on is what specifically makes Livermore such a fantastic growing area for Cab Franc and Sauvignon Blanc. What is it about that, left bank Bordeaux geography, climate, topography, or even the Loire Valley version of it that is mirrored in Livermore, or what sets Livermore apart that those are the grapes that could really thrive there?
There are only a couple of valleys, Santa Ynez and Livermore, that are predominant, anyway, or prominent valleys that are east-west oriented valleys. Most of the valleys in California, Napa, Sonoma, um, valleys further south are north-south oriented.
Right.
So when you look at Livermore on a map, it's only about 20 miles on its western flank from San Francisco Bay. And because its eastern edge is right up against the Altamont Pass, which is really the gateway to the Central Valley, the effect of rising temperatures in Tracy and Manteca and Stockton and Modesto and further north than Lodi causes there to be a very dramatic um, sucking in, an inhalation, let's just call it, of cold air from San Francisco Bay.
Okay.
And that cold air is what allows for this beautiful, very wide and dramatic diurnal temperature range. It's simply the range of temperatures between the hottest
Yeah.
point of the daytime and the coldest point in the evening.
Huge shifts, 30, 40, 50 degrees between the high and the low for the day, which is great for grape growing because you force the grapes to suffer and put all their energies into, grape production, not leaves and shoots during the day. But then at night, you allow them to relax, to stop producing sugars, no dehydration.
Think of the little grape acidity as little muscle guys on a bicycle all day long, and they're powering, trying to ripen, and they're so exhausted. And when you get a diurnal shift, they actually can stop pedaling and maintain their acidity. Whereas if it didn't drop enough, they'd have to keep pushing through the night to maintain their acidity. So now you get the freshness.
Right.
I just think of it as like these little grapes that are cycling their way around.
Little hamsters.
I will probably steal both of those images at some point in time.
Steven, you said what's on the east side? I know you said that the 20 miles from the San Francisco Bay, and what was the other thing?
The Altamont Pass.
Yeah.
Altamont.
So the Altamont Pass is kind of this pass through the foothills, and Livermore is a valley. Livermore Valley is a kind of a bowl-shaped valley, but the valley floor is 800 feet above sea level, so it's really up in the foothills. Napa Valley is like 150 feet above sea level on its valley floor. They're more of a dramatic V-cut kind of a shape to the valley. Livermore is more of a bowl, but all of the vineyards in Livermore are significantly above sea level, and up in the foothills, where Gilmedi Vineyard is planted, for instance, is right in that Altamont Pass. And what's even more dramatic from my perspective than the ability of the characteristic of the diurnal temperature range of photosynthesizing during the day when it's hot and creating sugar, and then the cold air coming in and really shutting things down and allowing the fruit to maintain malic acid and tartaric acid, which are the acids you want to give you a really complete, long experience of the wine in your mouth. Right. Climate change in Livermore is about wind. And the Mirassou family has had a great deal of experience with wind, having planted 1,000 acres of vineyards in the Salinas Valley. And that I think may be one of the windiest growing areas in the world. Plants don't like wind. Vines shut down when it gets too windy because they're trying to maintain moisture. When they close their stoma, they stop respiring, they stop giving off oxygen, and they maintain CO2 internally. Without CO2 being expired, there's no photosynthesis. So we get fewer hours each day of sugar production, which means that we need more days in the growing season to get the aggregate number of hours to get physiologically ripe fruit. So where in Napa, you'll get this just this huge romp, and you were mentioning, the jump from 15 bricks to 18 bricks in one day for Sauvignon Blanc.
Right.
You get this great romp of sugar, which happen that's kind of the ripening characteristic of grapes that happens earliest and happens fastest.
Yeah.
So in warm weather, if you're consistently in the mid 80s to to 90, 91, 92, let's say, you're going to get sugar production just zooming. You're not going to get physiologically ripe seeds or skins or titratable acidity pH levels happening in concert. Where you will if your sugar production is sort of it's truncated every day. These arcs start coming more into concert and they ripen at the same time at the end of the season. We're routinely harvesting in mid-November
Mm.
from Gilmedi Vineyard in the eastern foothills of Livermore. So people have this misapprehension that it's a million degrees there, that we're the Central Valley. We're much cooler in the eastern foothills than Napa is, especially from St. Helena north, let's say mid Napa Valley to the northern part of the valley. So we get, and this is where it's really important for Cab Franc, I think, is that we're able to get physiologically ripe fruit at sugar levels that allow us to produce wines at alcohol levels of 13 to 13.5 to maybe 14 in a real warm year like in 2022, for instance. So we're getting all of the flavors that we want, but they're fresh flavors. They're not jammy flavors that come about because you're harvesting at 26 bricks or 26 and a half bricks. And no matter how much you water back to get to an alcohol level that's 14, those jammy flavors persist forever. Can't do anything about that. If you get ripe fruit though at 23 and a half to 24 bricks, you get beautiful fresh fruit flavors that then evolve in a much more complex way over time, I think, than those jammy, kind of those jammy flavors that I associate with
So, so
warmer
you're getting
growing grapes.
phenolic ripeness without getting sugar ripeness.
Correct. You end up getting a sugar level that is significantly lower than a real warm growing area or less windy growing area. The wind also tends to toughen the skins up, so you get a little bit more tannin extraction. And we can get into this if you want, if people are interested about how we actually make our wines and how we extract tannin from our fruit. But windy conditions can be really interesting conditions to work with. They are very interesting conditions to work with, but also can do some very interesting things with the fruit itself to provide, especially from the Cab Franc standpoint. And this I'm sorry, I tend to talk very elliptically.
No, that's okay. And I think, we'll talk a lot about the extraction methods and the production methods when we get to the Cab Franc and the elements, but this is
Right.
probably a good point to talk a little bit since,
And by the way, if you want to listen to Steven talk on and on and on, you can listen to the podcast and interview I did with him because he talks a lot too. We had a great conversation.
It's 27 hours long. So
he had to change batteries 5 times.
break out a couple of days for that, or some long car rides. But no, one of the things that's interesting with the Cabernet Franc Blanc or Blanc de Franc or whatever you want to call it, is not just that it's a real recent development. I mean, like last 5 years type of recent development, but the level of acidity that's held by these grapes, because you're talking about a lower sugar level, and a lot of times with that production, the acids, if you're letting the grapes hang longer, even with the lower sugar, the acids are starting to rise, your pH level is starting to rise. But
except when you have diurnal shifts and you have cool, consistent, as opposed to spikes of heat.
Right, exactly.
You'll tend to get, no matter how cool it is, the longer the fruit hangs, you're going to get a degradation of malic acid. So malic acid, malum is the Latin word for green apple, right? So malic acid is that green apple acidity, very tart, very fresh, very enlivening. Malic acid and tartaric acid. Grapes really are the only fruit out there that contain any kind of quantity of tartaric acid. And in fact, archaeologists have been able to determine age of winemaking because of the crust of tartaric acid
Yes.
in bowls from 7,000
Those
years ago.
those wine diamonds that you get
Exactly.
sometimes on the cork or the
That's
rim
right.
of the bottle. That's the tartaric acid
Right.
that's titrated out into solids.
That's right. Cream of tartar made from grapes,
Mhm.
tartaric acid. Um, the I from the standpoint of the white Cab Franc Blanc, we call it Cab Franc Blanc. Um, we had my wife Beth runs our cellar. She's one of so my son, my wife, and I are the three winemakers for 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 the brand. My life is changing a bit. I'm out in the street a lot more because of distribution challenges, and so my wife, who runs our cellar meticulously, is the one doing a lot of the organizational work in-house and the like. She's from Oregon. We were traveling up to see parents and ran into an old friend, Leah Jorgensen, who had made she doesn't make wine anymore, but had made some vintages of white Cab Franc from Southern Oregon. And we tasted, I think it was probably 2018, 2019. We tasted one of her wines. It was delicious. And because we had access to a lot of Cab Franc in Livermore, we decided to try to make one. So our first vintage was 2022, and we love this wine. This is a really interesting. This is one of those wines. I love wines that are can be intellectually interesting. Certainly are interesting from a organoleptic standpoint, from a flavor standpoint, an aroma standpoint, a hedonistic standpoint, that sort of thing, an emotional standpoint to be sure. And this particular wine kind of fits all of those bills in a way. Um, Making white wine from red grapes isn't a new thing. You've all had champagne, right? You've all had sparkling wine from California. Often, those wines are made from Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, Chardonnay, three main grapes of Champagne. If you take red grapes and you press them gently, you'll get clear juice, which all of the grapes that we know. There are a few grapes out there, the Tenturiae family of grapes, that have red pulp, but
Yes.
most of the
We
grapes have
featured an Alicante Boucher last month.
Alicante
So
Boucher,
yeah.
exactly right. So that those grapes are rare in terms of Baco Noir. Those grapes are rare in terms of red fleshed fruit. Most is white fleshed. And so if you're careful about how you pick early enough, so lower sugar levels, when the skins aren't really mature yet, they're not giving off color anthocyanins as readily as they will when they're completely ripe. You have an opportunity of making a lower alcohol wine with more acid drive that has echoes, reminiscences of the red variety that they will make if you when you pick them later, when they're ripe, when they're 23 bricks, 24 bricks. The thing I wanted to experiment with Cab Franc Blanc was the idea of taking a variety that is I can't think of another grape in my mind offhand that is mostly as closely associated from an aromatic and flavor standpoint with its skins as
Mm.
Cab Franc. This whole family of grapes is called the Carmenet family of grapes, the Bordeaux varieties. Um, Merlot, Petit Verdot, Sauvignon Blanc, Cab Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Carmenere
Yeah.
all have a fair amount of pyrazine, methoxypyrazine compound in the grape skins, kind of a natural insecticide. Um, it's the same compound that gives bell peppers their bell pepper flavor. They metabolize out of the skin of grapes during the growing season with more direct sunlight. So over the course of the growing season, especially if you're picking at 24, 25, 26 bricks, you're metabolizing most of this quality out of the skins.
You're saying other grapes don't carry this?
Um, Uh, Most other red varieties don't really carry pyrazine the way that this family of grapes does.
It's
Huh.
yeah. It's why you don't see a lot of like Grenache or Syrah that has a lot of that vegetal components
Exactly.
to it. Yeah.
Pinot Noir,
Plus, yeah,
oh
those
yeah,
are also grapes that tend to thrive in warmer environments. So I think just evolutionarily they've
exactly,
removed it from themselves.
exactly. The varieties that grow in cold places like Pinot Noir, like Gamay Noir, don't really have this quality because, as you say, Chris, from an evolutionary standpoint, if you're going to be growing in cold air, you don't want to be beleaguered by
Right.
by this thing
Well,
that
they're thinner skinned grapes.
indeed.
So yeah, so
They
they
are
probably
thinner skin.
can't carry the pyrazines in
That
it.
right.
Right.
And what's interesting about pyrazines, though, green doesn't mean one thing. Green, or herbal. I like to refer to it more as an herbal component. Rests on a continuum, just like Brett does, just like
Mhm.
TCA does, just like a lot of other qualities in wine that, depending upon a person's sensitivity to these things, and depending upon how much is actually there, you'll get more or less of these things. Um, Pyrazine, if you were to pick unripe Cabernet Sauvignon from Monterey County, like my family made in the 70s and 80s, unfortunately, at Mirassou, you'll get a bell pepper asparagus kind of thing. If you pick if you pick Cabernet Franc in Livermore and you pick it at the right time, what you tend to get, I think, is bay leaf, sage, uh, paprika, those kinds of more roasted, savory herbal qualities rather than the fresh,
Yeah.
green,
More
less ripe
vegetal.
qualities,
Yeah.
vegetal quality, fresh jalapeno in Sauvignon Blanc,
Yep.
cat pea in Sauvignon Blanc, the herbal, that dried herbal quality that's very much a part of really well-made Merlot, or very green Cabernet Sauvignon, which is horrible and can be found in a lot of places, unfortunately. All of those elements are pyrazine derived. And so what Livermore allows us, because again of the way that the valley is situated and because of climate change and its proximity to a very hot inland part of California, is 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 really kind of sculpting in a way these beautiful qualities of Cab Franc and bringing them to the fore. These savory herbal qualities, this great acid drive, these, depending upon the clone, redder or darker fruits, um, uh, without a jammy quality that you get in other warmer places that make Cabernet Franc a lousy version of Cabernet Sauvignon. If
Right.
you're, my belief with anything is that it's important to let it be itself, right? It's important to let Cab Franc be Cab Franc. There are inherent qualities to this variety, just as there are for Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, every other grape. Some more interesting than others. But with Cab Franc needs to be allowed to be Cab Franc. If you're harvesting too late, you're taking away from that fruit everything that makes it such an exciting and beautiful and sexy thing. If you're picking it at the right time, you're allowing it to express itself in a way that is absolutely inherent and intrinsically important as the defining qualities of that grape. So that's what we strive for every year. There are a lot of places, and I think Paso is one of them, where um, heat and picking decisions conspire to maybe bleed out some of the
Yep.
elegance of the variety and the like. Napa, same way. Not
Right.
everything has to be ultra jammy and 200% new oak to be delicious. Most things don't.
Yeah. No, I have intimate knowledge of a Paso Robles winery, one we featured here on the club before, that their philosophy is that there should be no Parazines in a Cab Franc. And so they are very, very late pickers. And, they like the high acidity, but they want to make sure that there are no green components. They frown upon not just Livermore, but like the Finger Lakes of New York or some of
Sure.
the cooler
Sure.
weather areas, even parts of the Loire, where you get more of those vegetal herbal, those pyrazine notes to it. What I
Yeah.
find most interesting about the Blanc de Franc is it's not the fruit that I would have expected. I would have expected this to be, because of the early pick, because of those pyrazines, more of the, Sauvignon Blanc style, high acid, tartar fruits, more citrus driven. But to me, it's got so much stone fruit. I mean, you're getting peaches and apricots, and it's just got this round, full lushness to it that's so unique. Why do you think that is?
I think you've nailed it, Chris. I think that, and we have 3 years of experience with this, of making it. And we press the fruit coming in. We pick at 21 bricks, 21 and a half bricks, let's say. So that again, the skins aren't ripe yet. They don't give a lot of color off easily.
Yeah.
We press gently. We have a long press cycle, about 3 hours, let's say, to get all of the juice that we're going to get. Normally, white varieties, 150 gallons per ton. We get 125 gallons per ton on this particular wine. It goes into stainless steel.
Mhm.
It gets fermented at about 48 degrees, 47 degrees. It takes about 2 months to get dry at that cold
Oh, wow.
temperature.
Yeah.
And what we do is it's patience, and I'm an totally impatient person, but it's patience. Thank God for my wife and son. As far as that goes, cold temperature, gravity, everything that's going to fall out color wise falls out over the course of 2 months, and then
Mhm.
we'll filter the wine because we stop malic acid. So we stop malactic conversion so that we can maintain some of that really enlivening acidity on the finish of the wine. And the wine ends up being a beautiful white wine, not a pinkish wine, which we desperately didn't want to have. And the techniques that we use it's very simple. It's time, and it's being careful about pressing and that sort of thing. But what I found from the very first vintage on was this wine smelled to me like Albarino in the fermenter.
Hmm.
That white nectarine, white peach, though that component, that fruit component reminded me of Albarino from Lodi. And I really liked it a lot. Over time, as the wine was bottled and was in bottle for, let's say, a year, for that year-long cycle, you tend to get a little bit of like tarragon notes. The kind of licoricey component that you get is a fennel bulb or fennel pollen or tarragon or whatever in Cab Franc. Again, an inherent quality of Cab Franc showed itself ever so slightly in the white wine. What was intriguing to me, and you hit on it, was the texture of the wine, the weight, the heft reminded me more of like a white Rhone blend or white Rhone varieties than it did um, a California white that you might assume would be more Sauvignon Blanc-y. In my mind, there really isn't any kind of citrusy note that you would associate with Sauvignon Blanc, and there's definitely a heftier, richer kind of mouthfeel
Yeah.
to this wine than for Sauvignon Blanc typically. And I
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
think I mean, I commented on this, but across the board, every time, and I've had some other Blanc Francs, and I never get the pyrazine quality. Yeah, maybe getting a little of that tarragon comes in later, but to me, these red grapes vinified white, whether it's been Grenache, Tempranillo, Malbec, even, they have so much texture. It's not so much about the aromatic, and if anything, the aromatics, they're not red wine aromatics, but you get some of those red fruits sometimes, like you might get like a strawberry or something that you wouldn't normally get in a white grape, but it's the texture that gets you every time. These are like super food friendly
Yeah, absolutely.
wines that can do more than what white wine lots of times can do.
Totally agree. And I would suggest to folks, I always like to start drinking red wines maybe a little bit cooler than cellar temperature, whatever that means, because you get an evolution of the experience of flavors and aromas changing as the wine warms up in your glass. I would suggest the same thing with a white, but I'd start like at Chardonnay temperature and not Sauvignon Blanc temperature,
Yeah.
because I think this wine is beautiful at room temperature too. I think there's enough acidity there to be clean still, and I think that at a little bit warmer temperature that texture starts to show through more. And I really I like that. I like the way that it suits this particular wine. I like the way that it helps with food pairing and allows it to be paired with things that you wouldn't, with richer foods that you wouldn't maybe expect that you could pair Sauvignon Blanc with, for instance.
Right.
But yeah, the textural aspect of this wine is really a beautiful part of it, I think.
Yeah. Speaking of food, we always ask our winemakers, what are their perfect food pairings with this particular wine? So what would you pair with this? I have some thoughts, but I'd love to hear yours.
You know, I'm um, learning about this. I love to cook, and I love to kind of experiment with things as I cook. So I don't think about sort of class. I don't even know that classic pairings exist all that much anymore outside of a few wines, Sauterne and
Right.
Foie Gras, for instance.
It's hard to have a classic pairing with a wine you don't see very often,
Well,
which is a white
I
Cab
had
Franc.
totally.
I had to explain Stilton and port to my winemaker the other day, and her
Yes.
response was, Stilton, oh God, two things I hate. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, we're sitting you down and taking you
Yes.
through a proper
Time for
tasting.
a little education.
Exactly.
What I like about this wine is because of its depth and heft, medium minus, let's say, um, and its acid. I like slow cooked foods. So, like a cassoulet that is mostly beans, let's say, white beans, those kind of cannellini beans, soups that are a little richer. Um, I think this wine goes beautifully with chicken dishes. I think that you always have to worry about I've had this wine with oysters and various things. I don't think it works particularly well.
Too
Um,
textured.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there's
Yeah, you need
a
that sharper acid
And
for
it's not
those.
right,
about bright acidity, it's about textured acidity.
exactly. And so I think that it works as a counterpoint to kind of cut through some of the richer aspects of of cannellini beans or and a little bit of pork fat or whatever, bacon or whatever you wanted to do. Um, when we get to the reds, that's much easier. Lamb, anything reds. The white is a little bit more because, as you said, Allison, it's a fairly rare wine at this point in time.
Yeah.
There's no cookbooks that have put the white
That
Cab
is
Franc in.
true. Yeah.
Not
No,
yet.
we've had some great suggestions. Scott threw out risotto, which I could see. My
Absolutely.
initial thought with this was fettuccine Alfredo, just absolute
Yes.
classic,
Yes.
fatty, rich, but you've
Yes.
got the acidity to match that texture. Stacy had it with pesto on a cracker, which sounds like the most bougie and banal thing like I've ever heard. So it's like
Well, I'll
foie
let
gras.
you know
It's
because
like
my
foie
Well,
gras
buddy
on a
made
Pringles.
pesto and a cracker, you need one extra element of texture in there, a cheese, a
Yes.
pasta, something
Yes.
softer than a cracker to let the pesto
Yes.
get in.
Yes. Kind of marry you. Um, yeah,
Not knocking it. If you enjoy pesto
no,
on a
God, and
cracker, eat away.
that's the thing that I always this part of the wine conversation is always a little difficult for me because I don't believe that any pairing works. I mean, if it works for you, that's fine. That's great. Not every wine's a great wine because you like it. Some wines can be flawed, and if you like a lot of Brett, that's not necessarily making it a great wine. But I think it's important that you eat what you like and you drink and eat what you like and you experiment with things. If you have the time and inclination to think about to be constantly tasting as you're going along with the cooking. You add a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of star anise in your boeuf bourguignon elevates that dish amazingly, and it works extraordinarily well with Cab Franc. Um, the right pairing is the pairing that works best for you, the one that gives you the most emotional connection to the food and to the evening. You're making dinner for your family. Your kid comes back from college. It's a first, second, third, fourth, fifth date, whatever. These are all the occasions in which wine should shine. Right? Wine's a conveyor of emotion. That's one of its most powerful and beautiful aspects. And to be too rigid about what kind of pairing we want to have or what's right, who cares? I don't care what's right.
I think to an interesting point, and seeing some of the other things, other pairings they have, like even what Cameron has with the little gem salad with tarragon green goddess. I mean, that could work well because it could bring out any herbaceous quality the wine has. But I think that's what's really fun about a white wine like this, is that you can pair it with a lot of different things and really just let them meld together because of the texture with the food, just as long as it's not super overpowering of a spice or weight or something.
Yeah,
Right.
I was thinking with this, with that texture, like it definitely brings kind of your butter poached white fish into play, like your
Absolutely.
fillet of sole, your halibuts,
Exactly.
your sand dabs, things like that.
Absolutely. Abalone, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
The risotto suggestion is great because risotto is sort of a blank slate, right? It's a conveyor of flavor for whatever it is you want to put in it.
Like Chardonnay, it's a blank slate.
And
Yes.
exactly, Patty, you don't even need food with it.
Right. Right. You don't need food. Yeah, exactly. This is a wine that I drink when I'm making stuff, and we kind of get into red wine territory with food mostly. But there's a um white wine, white wines for me are white wines and gin and tonics serve the same purpose. They're palate cleansers, they're refreshers, we're in the cellar, let's say going through 70 barrels of Cabernet Franc to make blends and the like, not necessarily in one day, but over the course of a week. You know, a white wine like this with really nice acidity is definitely one to kind of enliven, kind of clean the tannin off of your tongue, get your kind of recalibrated for food. And that's why I think acid's so important with wine and food pairings, because it serves as a way of sort of cleaning your mouth for the next bite, kind of resetting your taste buds.
I'm going to tell you one thing I appreciate but don't like.
Okay.
And I think I can share this with two other people on the group, Cameron and Marcy Joe, since the three of us all live alone. We do these alone. It's enough to have two people and 4 bottles of wine. You have 3 screw cap wines. I
Yes.
want to drink all this wine, but I'm
Yes.
one person with now 3 opened wines. I don't know what to do.
It's rough, I know.
If you drink all 4 of them in one night, it's not a problem. If you're doing that, for
one
nights
of them,
in a
but
row,
I
then it
opened
is.
the other 3.
You're getting to one of my questions that we were going to get to when we get to the elements. But
Okay.
since we're deep in conversation and we've only touched on the first wine, we should move on to the rosé of Cabernet Franc, and talk a little bit about that, and its production, which I imagine there's some similar qualities to the Blanc de Franc, but at the same time it is its own beast, and they often say that rosé wines are the most difficult to make in the cellar.
It's an interesting process for us. Um, in that, so I was talking about kind of the yields that we get with Cab Franc Blanc, and part of that is, and really the only reason why that is the case is because we don't want to add things like charcoal,
Right.
or PVVP, which is a plastic that will help fine out color from wine.
Yep.
So if we were to press to 160, or if we had a really big press, we could get to 180 gallons per ton. We would get a lot of color in the white wine.
Right.
And we would have to come at the end of the process and add stuff to it to get it white that we don't want to add. So that directly impacts our rosé production, in that we would expect 150 gallons per ton with the press that we use. We press soft to about 125. It ends up being 125 gallons, but really it's more of a sensory thing. I'm looking at the press pan. I'm looking at the juice coming out. I'm looking at how colored it is. I'm tasting it. We call it, let's say, at 125 gallons per ton. There's still juice there. So out of the press pan, we pump it off to stainless steel and we settle it overnight, and then we'll go to another tank. So we'll rack it off of the gross lees, just the bits of stem and bits of skin and the like that's there. And it will go into its tank, where it will be sort of a jacketed tank. We can hook it up to glycol, like an antifreeze basically. And then we have a thermostat. We can crank the temperature down and start fermentation.
The glycol does not come in contact with the wine. That's why it's
No,
jacketed. It's on
it's
the outside. So it just
jacketed.
cools
Yep.
the stainless steel tank down
Just
to.
again, this is the first press.
This is the first press juice.
First press juice.
So the second press juice is where the rosé comes into play.
Okay.
And so what happens is we don't rotate the press at all as we're pressing off the white.
Right.
Because if you tumble that press, you declump it. The chance
where you get the colors.
Giving more color is, we don't want that. So we get 125 gallons per ton. Then we move the press, declump it, and then where we would press to 1 atmosphere, 1 bar on the white, we go to 1.75. We go as hard as we can on the rosé. So
and this is on all those grapes that have been already pressed for the white.
Exactly. So it's a second press of the same fruit. So there's still some like 25 gallons per ton left over, maybe a little bit more, 30 gallons per ton left over, that we are okay with a little bit of color. And we're certainly okay with a little bit more tannin. And
I was
that's
gonna
what
say you're getting tannin and phenolics with that second press.
exactly right.
A little
So
more
that
heft.
you're going to get a little bit higher pH level with that too. Pressing against the skins will increase the pH level, and color will come out a little bit. Even the rosé during fermentation is not that much darker than the white. It depends upon the year. Depends on a multitude of factors.
No, it's a cotton candy pink color.
It is, and the way that it gets to this color for us is we do a bench trial when the wine's dry with red Cab Franc. And so we'll take a graduated cylinder and we'll do 1% red Cab Franc, 2% red Cab Franc, 3% red Cab Franc to get to a point where we really dial in a color that we like and a texture that we like. And the red Cab Franc, so it's 100% Cab Franc, and the red Cab Franc is it just adds a little bit more texture. It changes the flavor of the wines to touch,
Right.
and gives it just a little bit more tannin also. Because it's been produced as
what percentage of red Cab Franc would you say is in?
So in this particular vintage, it's 3%. So
this is pre-fermentation or
no,
post?
this is post. This is right
the
before
final blend, yeah.
Yeah, this is right before bottling. So this beautiful kind of salmon coral color, whatever you look at it is and I'll tell you the reason why we do it this way. I want a Provençal style rosé. I want a rosé at 12.5 alcohol. Whatever. I think this is probably 12.5 in this case. I want a 12.5 completely dry as my grandpappy's scalp wine. And the longer we go, the longer we hang the fruit, the riper it gets, the more sugar it gets, the higher the alcohol, and the less pronounced and wonderful that acidity is in the wine.
Right.
You can make rosé from saignée, the saignée prop, which means to bleed in French. You can take fully ripe fruit, Cab Franc, Cabernet, so Merlot, whatever, Grenache, and you can, as you're crushing into stemming that fruit, you can take some of that juice that comes off there that's pinkish in color, and use that as your rosé material. You get an added benefit of concentrating the red because you're increasing the ratio of skin
to
juice.
Yep.
But what you're doing also is you're generally, when you do a saignée, you're getting ripe fruit. You're getting fruit that will be a 14% alcohol wine. No, there's 14% alcohol rosé should be illegal, frankly. I'm gonna make a bold statement.
I know someone who makes a 17% alcohol rosé, and I think you need to tell him he's arrested.
Yes.
Well, if you want to make
his name is Russell.
There you go. If you want to make vermouth from that, that's great. Then you get your 17 and 18% wine because you've aromatized it and you've added brandy to it and that kind of thing. But
if you were to arrest all the 14% plus rosé winemakers, Paso Robles would not have a wine industry. So we appreciate you not rounding up the.
There are plenty of other rosés out there. You know what?
I try not to be too. I try to be inclusive. There are certain things that I don't, and we'll talk more about it when we get to the red Cab Francs about how you ought to do it, in my opinion, whether that means anything or not to anybody other than myself. The back blending or the bench trial blending of color to the rosés for us is a function of making sure that so predominantly the predominantly important characteristics for us are alcohol levels and acid. And the additional tannin you get there from pressing harder is a function of pressing harder. But we also don't want to underestimate the importance of the aesthetic beauty of a really pretty rosé color, right? That blush color is very enticing. It's very food friendly. It's very
right? From a sales standpoint, there is no too pale rosé.
Yes. No, I agree with you. You know, we've done some sparkling wines of Barbera, a rosé of Barbera,
Mm,
sparkling from Livermore, that's really beautiful.
yeah,
But it's the color of Chardonnay. You know, it just because sometimes when you ferment, yeast will tend to find color out. When
right.
you add sulfur when the wine's dry to make sure that you are, if you want to stop uh, malactic conversion, you add a fairly, you add a dose of sulfur at the end of the day. It kills off any, lactic bacteria that might be there that will do the conversion, but it also sulfur tends to be a color fining agent. So it'll fine color out as well. Um, so we want to create a rosé that has the aesthetic appeal from a color standpoint, but that doesn't get in the way of the acidity and and flavors and textures that we have come to like in this style of wine.
Yeah. So ultimately, you're ending up with, a smaller volume of juice for your rosés than you are for the Cab Franc Blanc because, it's 120 gallons and you're really only getting 60 to 65 gallons from that second
Correct.
press.
Correct. So we don't. I mean, the rosé is um, the rosés are popular. Obviously, they go through cycles of popularity.
Right.
We don't make a lot of it, but we like it for wine. For food accompaniment. We like it for wine club. Variants and that sort of thing, but it ends up being a relatively small volume. So if we're looking at 25 gallons is what it's 16% of the total yield, let's say.
Yeah.
So we end up making 60 cases or
Oh
90
wow.
cases. In last year, I think we did 65 cases or something along those lines.
Wow. So more rare
Very
than the
limited.
Cab Franc Blanc. Yes,
Absolutely.
exactly. Very nice.
Absolutely.
No, and one of the things I always love about Cab Franc rosés, the ones I've had from the Loire, from Chinon in certain
Mhm.
places, is just that leanness and the like savory flavors that you get out of it. It's definitely, one that seems to go even drier than most rosés. You're not getting a lot of those kind of cherry berry fruits. It seems to me to really lean into not even citrus, but there's just a almost like a rhubarb characteristic to them, like
Yes.
almost a kind of
Yes.
savory bordering on bitter note, but it with that high
Exactly
acidity
right.
can be very refreshing.
Exactly right. And I've been sort of diving into the vermouth research because I think that Cab Franc as a base wine for vermouth could be really awesome. In part because I think that there's the herbal quality of Cab Francs. There's an affinity to with bittering like rhubarb,
Yeah.
um, like certain herbal notes that are bittering agents we would use to make vermouth, for instance. And I think that one of the things that bitterness, to me anyway, is a mouth-watering characteristic in a way. Again, assuming the right balance, but I think that there's the I I don't think Cab Franc's an overly fruity wine. It's not Zinfandel. It's not
Right.
even Merlot in some
Petite
instances.
Syrah, it's not
Petit
right.
Syrah. It's much more um, the sort of the I guess the amplitude is not particularly high in terms of fruit part of the wine. But when you bring the herbal qualities in and you bring the acid in concert, these qualities work to create something that's absolutely magical. And I think you get a touch of that with the rosé because it does have red Cab Franc in it. Consequently, it does have some of those savory herbal qualities that we would have gotten from the red wine that we did end up using.
Right. No, it's delicious and it's crisp and it's elegant. I think that's sort of
Thank
the adjective that really sort of jumps off the page to me because, like you're saying, you can have a lot of rosés that are fun, that can be a little round, a little full-bodied, rich. But this one has a leanness and an elegance to it. It's just beautiful. Food
you.
pairings with this one. What are your thoughts?
So, I always the first thing I always look at is sort of hard cheeses,
Mhm.
charcuterie. I think that I think that some
Aperitif wine.
yeah, exactly. Exactly right. I think that this wine could go with certain kinds of salads. I think that it could go with like seafood salad of some sort that had some calamari in it, some shrimp in it, for instance.
Salad niçoise.
Yes, indeed, a niçoise salad. I think that Parmesan, aged Parmesan. I think like mortadella. I think that uh, cured meats that aren't too spicy, I think go
Mhm.
beautifully with this wine.
Yeah.
I think
For
that
the summer, it would go nicely with a stone fruit salad.
I agreed. And I think a very ripe tomato salad too.
Yeah.
With some ricotta salata.
Exactly. I think that, I made a tart the other day with ricotta salata and ripe tomatoes with oregano and various other things. And this is a wine that would go beautifully with that kind of dish, I think.
Yeah, my initial thought with this was like either toro or maguro sushi
Yes.
or sashimi, I think,
Yeah.
or even like a poke. This would
Yeah.
just go fantastically with just the fattiness of the tuna, but it's light and it's got the acidity to cut through it and really bring out kind of the earthy and salty notes of that fish with a wine like this.
Absolutely. I think that would be a beautiful combination. I checked the chat out,
Yeah.
and there was some comments about Corvins and screw caps. Um, Corvin makes these little caps
Yeah.
that are meant for screw cap, and I use them every day when I go out and sell wine. They work pretty well. They work very well. It's always It's always a little canister goes out too soon.
Right.
Right.
That's a different
But,
issue.
And cost you $10 to $12
Exactly.
a canister.
but I opened these and I was too lazy to walk 3 steps and get my tops.
I
But I don't
understand.
think it's too
We're
late.
all
I'll
busy.
do it after.
There you go. Exactly. They
Then
do
I
work
can drink
well.
tomorrow and next week and the week after.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
In my tasting room, we have the Corvin sparkling wine system, and I
Oh,
swear by that for
that's
keeping our
cool.
bottles safe and still bubbly when I'm
I
out of the
have one of
tasting room.
those too, but then it really only lasts for like 2 weeks. And
Yeah.
I unfortunately had a bottle in my fridge for over a month and it still
Well,
has a top to it, but I just decided
that's a you problem, not a Corvin problem right there. So. All right, let's move on to the main event, which Steve has
the
been
main
just
event is Cab Franc all day.
he's been champing at the bit to talk about the red Cab Franc. So we are going to jump into your 2022 Cab Franc.
And yes, by the way, Pam, lobster roll would be great.
It would, yeah.
Yes, that would be great. Like an oyster pull boy.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things with, a little bit of something that with some breading on it would work well, I think, too.
Actually, yeah, lobster roll, I think even with the Cab Franc bulk would be
I think would work well
delicious
too.
as well, especially one of those really buttery New England rolls.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
picked up a piece of chicken at Gelson's Day in the bready thing because I wanted to eat before this, and
Yeah.
it was the breaded, what do they call it? The pizza
Cutlets?
Milanese, not Milanese, but it's something like that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Little
Milanese.
herb and cheese. And I had that right before I came and I had pre-poured the wines. And yes, I can tell you, I enjoyed it very much with a little sip of the white and a little sip of the rosé.
There you go.
Nice.
Perfect.
Nice. I like it.
So, let's talk specifically about the vineyard that you're getting most of your Cab Franc. You've kind of mentioned it before. I'm gonna call it the Tegrity, which I know is not right. That's
Two
a South
different
Park thing,
vineyards,
but
Chris.
So in this particular wine, the
The
22
white and the rosé came from one vineyard. This comes from a different.
correct.
right. But that's
So
Gilmedi,
Gilmedi
that's it, yes.
Vineyard is it's a 64-acre vineyard that was planted back in 1999 up in the foothills. So again, that I talked about the Altamont Pass.
Right.
This vineyard is kind of planted right up to the base of the
Watch out for the Hells Angels and the Altamont
Watch out for the
Pass.
Hells. Exactly. So there is that association, and it is that
Terrible old reference. I
Rolling
apologize.
Stones concert.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Vineyard runs from about 1,000 feet above sea level to 800.
Okay.
Kind of a rectangular shaped vineyard running down the hill from east to west. A couple of arroyos that run through the site that so that I don't know how many blocks there are, 10, 12 different blocks, all the Bordeaux varieties, a bunch of different clones of Cabernet Sauvignon, planted north, south, east, west, and then on a 45-degree angle, depending upon where the arroyo goes.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of clay in this site up on the top of the vineyard and a lot of beautiful loamy soils in the bottom half of the vineyard where the Cab Franc is planted. This is an absolutely gorgeous site, and it's gorgeous because of 6 different soil types ribboning through the vineyard, and because of, again, that relationship between the wind and the diurnal temperature ranges, which are absolutely dramatic in this particular site. And a great clone of Cab Franc. The clone that's planted at Gilmedi is a Bordeaux clone.
Mhm.
So that you may read about this, see it, hear it. ENTAV, ENTAV, an acronym that is roughly analogous to UC Davis, for instance. It's a Bordeaux foundation, like Foundation Plant Services at UC Davis, that will select clones of various varieties that are of the highest quality that can be sold to nurseries in other parts of the world. And so
Mhm.
this particular clone of Cab Franc, so it's all Gilmedi Cab Franc in this particular offering, um, is clone UC Davis clone 4 and Ontov clone 332. They're very romantic names. But they're numbered, that and this particular clone works absolutely gorgeously in Livermore.
Nice. Yeah, I've heard quite a bit about the Clone 4 because I know that's a common one to use here in Paso Robles as well.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you froze there for a second. You were holding
No, yeah,
so dramatically
I
on
was
there. That was quite well
yes.
done.
I'm just trying to figure out what I'm getting here.
Yeah.
I'm overlooking this there's a river right in front of me, and
Mm.
um and there's a bunch of, old growth redwoods and lavender in front of me. It's a really pretty thing. So I got caught there for a second.
But you're getting a lot of different aromas coming
I
at you
am.
from
I
all angles.
am. The
Nice.
Eel River here in Humboldt County. Um,
So
the
six different soils you mentioned in this
Yes.
particular vineyard. Um, uh, how are you? Is that something that you're keeping track of when you're sourcing blocks? Are you, you know, do you use that as kind of a dividing line when you're pulling different lots and doing your blends together, or how is that working out, or what are you finding with those different soil types?
So the folks who planted the vineyard originally planted it really well. Merlot tends to like more clay soil than Cabernet Sauvignon does. So it's planted along these soil breaks where there's a little bit more clay than in the lower part of the vineyard. Um, these are very clearly delineated blocks. They are Gilmedi has been the first vineyard for us in Livermore to get from which we get Cab Franc, but now
Mhm.
there are 3 or 4 others, and there's one that's brand new that will probably end up being the best Cab Franc vineyard in the valley, the best Cab Franc vineyard I've seen in California thus far. We'll talk about that in a minute, but the I think Stacy asked about clones of Cab Franc versus clones
Yes.
of Pinot Noir. Um, Pinot Noir clones are there's more of them that are commercially available than there are Cab Franc clones. There are a number of Cab Sauv clones too. All of these clones are different. They are, as you might imagine, a clone is a genetically identical piece of the variety that gets transferred, grafted onto the rootstock of another vineyard, let's say, or a new vineyard, to produce a certain set of qualities that the vineyard growers, the wine growers liked. Maybe more drought tolerant, maybe more even ripener throughout the course of the growing season, larger or smaller berries. There's just you create clones based upon characteristics that you want in the finished wines. There are 5 or 6 different clones in Livermore planted at this point in time. There's a couple that we don't have yet that we will have here very soon that I'm very excited about. The Loire Valley clone 214, or UC Davis 11, is one that is new in Livermore that we're extraordinarily excited about. This clone, though, clone 4, produces really elegant, beautiful Cab Franc. Compared to clone 5, which is Ontov 331, which we also use, and is the most widely planted clone in Livermore at this moment in time. Um, Clone 4, redder fruit to me, more um, uh, raspberry, more red cherry kinds of fruit notes. Also tends to show the herbal quality a little bit more dramatically, I think, than Clone 5 does. Maybe it's because it's maybe a slightly more ephemeral in terms of its overall structure compared to Clone 5. But there's this wine, we're at the very tail end of this vintage. So this wine's been in bottle for over a year at this point in time. All the everything that all the beneficial qualities that bottle bouquet gives to you, and age gives to you, I think are extant in this glass right now. I think this is just a beautiful glass of wine. No new oak at all in the aging. This was aged in neutral puncheon. So,
Hmm.
um, one of the things I said I would say earlier, Cab Franc shouldn't have new oak. If you're making a right Bordeaux, a big right Bordeaux blend, there's maybe reason to have new oak. If you're trying to make really gorgeous Cab Franc, though, that accentuates the just the alluring sexiness and complexity of variety, and that herbal quality and the way the fruit kind of sinuously sort of wraps around these herbal qualities, you don't want oak getting in the way of that.
Right.
Puncheons are roughly 2.x times bigger than a normal barrel, a barrique, a barrel that you're used to seeing. 500 liters versus 228 or 225 liters. The larger the barrel, the less extraction of oak you get in the same given time period. We want neutral. We don't want any quality of flavor, aroma, or taste of oak. We do want that micro oxidation quality that you get from being in barrel. You lift the bung, the bung out of the barrel, a lot of air rushes in, and it's like sandpaper. It will tend, and we'll talk about it with elements in particular, where you kind of sand off some of these sharper edges of acidity, and youthfulness that wines that are fermented in stainless or aged in stainless steel or concrete will give you. That's what we love about barrel, not flavor. We just like the way that it accentuates the texture of the wine and makes the wine a little bit rounder and a little bit more mature seeming in its youth.
Yeah.
A comment on this, but jumping back to the clone thing, and I think, Stacey, this is because it drives me crazy when Pinot producers talk about clones, because for the consumer, I just think that clones are a winemaker's choice. You just have to know too much, because they will, as someone said the other day, terroir will always trump clones. So you can run around saying you love Dijon clones, but if the terroir of Santa Rita Hills is more dominant, that's what's going to be more dominant, or Russian River Valley or Willamette Valley or whatever it is. But clones are important. But what a couple people pointed out that's really interesting is that Pinot Noir is a single varietal wine. It's not blended with anything. So to make it interesting, winemakers blend different clones together to give you different aromas and flavors and such. Every other grape, hence like Cabernet Franc, is typically a blended grape. So to enhance or balance Cab Franc, you would blend it with Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon and whatever. And so the reason you don't talk about clones in so many other grapes is because these grapes were usually blended with other grapes, not with other clones.
Yeah, I mean, wine appreciation 301, let's say. Clones, I mean, I love talking about wine every bit as much as anybody else does, and we'll go down the rabbit hole as far as we can go. But I agree with you. And in winemaking, the winemaker's choices in the cellar will trump terroir. So ultimately it's what the winemaker chooses to do with the wines, that give you the finest of the finished product. That being said, if we were to do a clonal series, if we were to make the wines the same way, harvested roughly the same time, of different clones of Cab Franc, you would definitely taste the differences, especially if we were to do it with a neutral, cement, stainless steel, what have you, just as you would with Pinot Noir and Cabernet Sauvignon, for instance. So
Right.
clones are certainly important from a winemaker standpoint, and for the very interested wine consumer, they're fun, they're interesting, they add depth and texture to the winemaking discussion.
But there's a context, because a clone in the Livermore Valley is not going to be exactly the same way in the Loire Valley, because they're different climates.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, but I
Absolutely.
think Stacy's hitting on it, where a lot of the clones, while there are differences for the winemakers, they're being presented up front to the people as a
Right.
marketing thing.
Well,
It's
no,
like
but that's
if
what
I
I'm
could,
saying.
it's just an extra level of differentiation. It's like, okay, I've
Yes.
got a Rutherford, Cabernet, but if I'm telling you it's clone B as opposed to anybody else who's not mentioning a clone, that makes me sound more exclusive,
Right.
different, unique.
But in the Pinot world, the reason they mention clones, because I was on a few winemakers recently in the San Ynez Valley when I was there last week.
You were on a few winemakers. I hope you use
Yeah.
protection.
Yeah, no, but I was getting on them about this whole clone thing when they're telling me over and over the clones, and the point was the reason we mention them is because that's our toolbox, the way other grapes have other grapes to blend with as their toolbox, and so it has become a more vocal conversation for Pinot producers than it ever was.
Sure.
And you're right, Stacy.
Exactly, that's the problem.
There's it is a shorthand for making things seem more complex when they're maybe not more complex.
Right.
Clonal additions are like adding salt and pepper and cumin. It they do alter the finished product in hopefully a good way. And I don't mean alter. They add nuances to the finished wine that
If you do
that
it well, you
didn't
shouldn't
add.
notice the difference.
In many ways, it can add there's a utilitarian bent to clones, but the way they're presented is more of an aesthetic
Absolutely. There's
aspect of it.
exactly right. Yes. It's there's nothing magical about it per se. It's just you're adding it's sort of adding uh subtly different structural characteristics
Right.
and organoleptic characteristics from the same grape.
So circling
Overall,
back, and then
yeah,
we can kind of stick a pin
yeah,
in clones, but
yeah.
this new clone that you said is emerging in the Livermore Valley, what specifically do you think that's going to start bringing out in grapes that's going to make it, kind of the premier, the preeminent clone that works in your particular region?
So 214 is the predominant clone, or at least one of them in the Loire Valley.
Mhm.
Chinon, Semur, Champigny, Orgoy. And it tends to be expressed at least there. Um, and one of the ways I think you can really tell Loire Valley Cab Franc from any other region is this root vegetable quality on the finish of the wines, right? For me, Semur Champigny is radishes, Chinon is beets. You've got these not dissimilar fruit qualities, and tends to be darker fruited there than this particular wine in my
Right.
mind,
Yeah.
and um, and also more tannic. And we have seen that at least through the first year. So it's not a trend by any stretch, but the first vintage of this from this new vineyard, um, one of the most tannic wines we made, including all the Cabernets that we made, Cabernet Sauvignons that we made, and darker fruited. So blacker cherry, blacker berries, more of that kind of this bonfire
Yeah.
on the beach the second day, where this kind of sandalwoody quality that kind of comes from this thing. Um, uh, it's going to end up being extremely important clone for the Steven Kent Winery. Whether it's important for Livermore Valley, it probably because we tend to be the leader, I think, in the Valley's Cab Franc production, but it's certainly not a clone that's unknown. It works its way very beautifully. You don't get that root veg quality, but you get a tannin and textural quality from this particular clone that you haven't gotten from any of the other clones that are already planted in Livermore. So that's, again, for me, structure is where the winemaker can do the most or do the least. The way things take how you extract, what you age in, when you pick these are all lead to kind of the structural aspect of the wines. And for me, that's the most important aspect for me when I'm tasting wines from barrel is what structurally, where does this belong in a blend, if it belongs at all.
Yeah. So we're getting a lot of comments about the nose, the bouquet on this
Hmm.
wine. Scott's getting some cola notes, and Patty and David are super intrigued. I'm guessing, not. I'm
I'm getting
assuming you're not
some of
getting
your
like, septic tank or something, and you're going, what is wrong with this
Hopefully
wine?
it's a positive thing.
I'm getting
Yeah.
some of your bay leaf,
Yeah.
that kind of, it's herbal, but in that very kind of well integrated, balanced herbal
Right.
thing.
It's interesting. And just playing around, my wife's name is Beth, and
Do you hear her calling?
I
But you
don't.
can't come home. You can't come home right now.
Exactly. She's pouring at a women's wine collective as one of the female winemakers in Livermore right now. Um, but I made this drink. I didn't invent it, but I made a drink that we call the Bethy for my wife. That is mezcal and fresh lime juice. And I made a reduction of Cab Franc with a bay leaf in it. So very
Oh,
centered, gently simmering for, half the bottle.
like a Cab Franc based syrup,
Yeah,
basically.
it's basically a syrup. It's simple syrup, a little bit of sugar, and it it reeks in every possible positive way of this bay kind of thing with this really interesting fruit component. And this reminds me of that syrup without the sweetness aspect of it. There's a beautiful um, complexity, a beautiful kind of bay is not just herbal. It has a little bit of cinnamon quality to it
Yeah,
in a
there's some sweetness and some
there's
spice to it as
yeah,
well.
there's a really interesting, it's very complex, and I love that aspect of it. There's a little bit of sage in here as well, I think. Those again, not fresh exactly, but not totally dried either. I think
Right.
there's a paprika note in the mouth, maybe more so than in the nose, that I think,
And to Scott's point, I
yeah,
can see where you're getting a cola note. It's not, I don't think it's as cola-y as like fresh the way you get in like Santa Rita Hills or Santa Maria Hills, Santa Maria Pinot Noir, which is
hmm
like cola,
hmm
but you get that kind of herbal that the sassafras is big.
It's that
sassafras.
cinnamon,
Yeah,
sage, sassafras.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
exactly. All of those things. Yeah.
yeah,
So totally,
yeah.
if you said cola notes, it totally makes sense.
No, I think that that's definitely there. I love the acidity of this wine.
By
I
the way,
love
Stephen,
the
you had
freshness.
you had Bayeth sitting right there. Bae
Oh, damn.
EH. Boom.
Oh, I told
Like
you I'm
it
not.
hits on so many
It
levels.
does. I'm practicing the marketing. I'm going to put my marketing hat on now. Thank you,
Exactly.
Chris. I'm going to
I
steal that from
I
you.
feel like, we're gonna walk into the tasting room and see
There you
little vials of
go.
the
Exactly.
Bayeth syrup that to
Exactly.
make the Bayeth
Exactly. It
cocktail.
actually is delicious, by the way.
No, it sounds
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's really cool.
Yeah, what I find interesting about Cab Franc, red Cab Francs, and this goes back to your point about the neutral puncheons, which if you think about the flavors that oak will impart onto a wine, vanilla, cinnamon, spicy
Nutmeg,
notes,
baking spices. Yeah,
right. Those are not things that are compatible with the more herbaceous notes, those
absolutely right.
greener notes. You're not going to combine cinnamon and bell pepper together. That's just
Absolutely right. No, I totally agree with you. And I think that, the folks, the winery that shall not be named that you were mentioning earlier, um, I think that the oak is more compatible with that style of Cab Franc because all the pyrazine's been baked out of the wine.
it's basically Cab Sauv Junior at that point.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah,
Lousy Cab Sauv,
right.
unfortunately.
What's really nice about this is that it's a medium-bodied wine, but it's so light. There's such a lift on the palate, so light that it almost is like, no, it's a light-bodied wine. It's not, but there's a lightness to it. There's such a bright, fresh, not a bright, a freshness to it, and it also has this really soft tannins but the lightness to the medium-bodiedness is kind of an interesting.
No, I agree totally. I think that from a food pairing standpoint, there's a substantiality to the wine
Mhm.
that allows it to stand up to a bunch of different foods, or that's negative to to
To pair.
to pair with and augment and
Yeah.
add to and
Compliment and yeah.
exactly. Uh, but there's a freshness to this wine. I mean,
Yes.
Hugh Johnson, the dean of before Jancis Robinson of British wine writing would always say, I don't care how big the red wine is, if there's no freshness there, then it's a failure. And that freshness is a function of acidity. It's a function of how much wood is there compared to all the other qualities that the fruit, acidity and that sort of thing. Um, I love the fact that I'm still tasting this wine from a minute ago. That there's a acid drive there's a long experience in the mouth with this wine that adds layers of complexity and interest to me, even when there's no wine in my mouth. And not just wines of this style,
It makes
wines
you
with this kind of
salivate.
balance. It does. It does. And I
Yeah.
think that's a function. That's what makes, for good food pairing is the
No,
fact
and
that you're salivating at the same time you're you're breaking down all the elements of the food. The wine's helping you do that because of the acidity. And I think it's a utilitarian and very useful function of wine. Um, and that's its least great quality.
right. No, and I think it ties back to that idea of, almost a note of bitterness to the wine, which increases that salivatory gland, that mouth
Mhm.
watering feel, and
Mhm.
having a little bit of that, especially on that finish, there is a little bit of a bitter note to it. It's
Yes.
not a full gentian root type, but it's
Right.
definitely, something in there that kind of just helps those salivatory glands explode,
Right.
which makes it a great aperitif wine, as we talked about.
Right.
You mentioned the cheeses and whatnot with the rosé, and I think that would
Right.
pair well with this, but
Right.
can definitely help with heavier, fattier meat dishes. Again, lamb you mentioned earlier, cassoulet, this would be a
Absolutely.
fantastic wine with cassoulet, sausages,
Yep.
things like that, just that have
Absolutely.
a higher fat content because you get that mouth watering quality to cut through
Hmm.
that fattiness. So
Ribs sound really good. My
ribs would be fantastic,
Yeah.
yes.
So what my buddy's doing, he's got a fire going on the other side of the house right now, and I can smell the smoke and the meat coming. So it's
All right. Well, we're over time, so we will rush through this next one so you can get to your ribs. But yes, if there still is a Tony Roma's, this is the wine you want to take to
But
Tony
it's nice
Roma's.
because it's not going to be an overpowering. It's not that it's good for ribs. Like a lot of people assume, oh, meat, I've got to have ripe fruit. I've got to have big tannins.
right.
No, because this is just it'll just kind of slide right in there with the food, pair
Well,
with it nicely, not overpower, not you can sip it on your own and then pair it with the food, and it's more subtle than
yes,
having some wine that has to hit you over the head.
Right.
yes,
Think is going to work with that barbecue sauce.
right,
No, and getting into barbecue, I think that's a great point, which is that one of the most difficult meat pairings to pair with wine is true smoked barbecue, because you don't want a wine that overpowers that smokiness, those flavors caused by the infusion of smoke into the wine. And I think this would be fantastic because the fruit on it is just light enough that you're going to get the smokiness, the char, the bitterness, but it's not like a cab that's going to overpower.
Great.
Yes, I love it. Sell the Bayeth sauce,
There
make
you
it
go.
make a barbecue sauce out of it, a rib
I'm gonna
glaze.
I'm gonna I'm gonna work on that, Scott, right before harvest.
Pam,
Rib, now that one's
type
rib
in what
Bayeth.
you're eating, Pam. I hope it pairs well with the
Yeah,
dish.
the rib glaze. That sounds fantastic. Love
Exactly.
it.
Beautiful. So let's move on, last but not least, because I know you want to get to dinner, to the elements, which, as pointed out earlier, the only wine you're using natural cork on.
Yes.
So this is a 2023, and this one is so unique because, not just the neutral puncheon, but you're doing concrete and stainless steel. And it's a 23. What was your thinking kind of behind doing that blend? At what point did you decide to experiment with the different um, holding tanks, the different production tanks, and then blend them together? Are you going to
And
do separate versions of each of them,
and it's
or
neutral barrel, not puncheon.
In this case, yeah,
okay, sorry.
for this wine. Um, so great. Beth and I had the good fortune of hosting a Steven Kent Wine Club cruise in Bordeaux
Nice.
uh, in 2024, 24. And we went to Saumur, which is a town in the center of the Loire Valley, kind of the center from my perspective. Chinon for some people, Saumur, Champagny for other people. It's right on the Loire River. This gorgeous 1,000-year-old town with 20,000 people. And we went there for a week and then hit a bunch of wineries while we were there because we wanted, again, to kind of go to the spiritual home of Cab Franc and learn more about it, meet winemakers, taste a bunch of wines. And in California is not always the does not always have the most up-to-date trends as far as winemaking equipment is concerned and that sort of thing. I remember having a laugh with my father about concrete and how we were fermenting in concrete 80 years ago at Mirassou, and how it's all becoming popular again in California.
Right.
Well, in Bordeaux, in all over Italy, in the Loire Valley, concrete vessels have been used forever
Yeah.
as fermentation um, tanks as well as aging tanks. And in walking through Domaine Bernard Baudry in Chinon, our friend Mathieu Baudry, who's a winemaker now, it is gigantic, like 12,000 hectoliter concrete vessels. And where we make our wine, there were some very small cubes, like 240-gallon cubes. We said, you know what, we love the way that those wines tasted. We love the textural aspect of concrete. We loved that it gives you, it's not inert like stainless steel. There are some flavors. It's kind of imagine sort of the aroma of the sidewalk with the first rain. It's not petrichor. It's not the street. It's the sidewalk. It's the fresh dirt. That kind of thing with the first hit of rain. That's kind of what concrete smells like to me. And it's porous, so there's evaporation, there's oxidation, things that are happening. Whereas stainless steel completely inert. We decided that would be fun to take Gilmedi Vineyard 2023. So this is all Gilmedi Vineyard fruit in 23 as the base wine, and age some of it in concrete and some of it in stainless steel and some of it in neutral barrel in this particular case, and then to make a blend of the three. So the Elements series, we packaged a 4-pack and we released it right before the election of 2024 and gave our club members an opportunity to kind of vote for their favorite. We had a little ballot that went along with things. Elements became a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 blend. So the wine that you're tasting right now is 2023 vintage, Gilmedi Vineyard fruit, 1/3 concrete aged, 1/3 stainless steel, 1/3 neutral barrel for 10 months only for all three. So the variables were reduced to the type of container.
Right.
And each of these was released separately, so they were very dramatically of themselves. The blend I love. I love the 23 vintage in Livermore is going to be absolutely extraordinary.
The 23 vintage everywhere in California is going to be freaking amazing.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. And we're just now the 22 that we had tonight, that tier of Cab Franc, the 23 vintage will be out in about, I don't know, 45 days, let's say. Stunning wine. And L'Autre-Côte, our high-end right bank blend, is stunning. I mean, it's just a great vintage. It's cool, relatively cool. 24 was warm.
Yeah,
didn't have the
challenging
heat
year,
spikes.
a lot of dropped fruit.
Didn't have the heat spikes of 22 though, which was Labor Day weekend.
2023 across the board was a cool, cold vintage.
Yes.
And there weren't big spikes. There was some heat at the end, but it was cold. And there's this in the Pinot Noirs that I've tasted in Santa Barbara and Sonoma and everywhere, this beautiful savory herbalness. You're tasting a Cab Franc in Livermore, like just the wines have been utterly exquisite. So if you're looking to get something to lay down and you want to grab them, I think 2023 is really a vintage to grab.
Totally agree. And I think that 25 is shaping up to be somewhat similar.
Everybody's looking. We'll see with the heat that's hitting right now, and if that's sustained or whatnot.
See.
But
exactly.
Right. Up until then, it's been a very cool, sort of moderate year.
I mean,
a decent amount of rain up front too.
Put it this way. I was just in San Ynez last week, and the grapes, not all the grapes have finished going through veraison. It's been that cold.
Where we are,
El Paso's picking already, and Livermore's starting to pick. Like there are parts of in Ballard Canyon and in Santa Rita Hills, the grapes are still plugging along.
Well, at Gilmedi and Morgan's and family, where the 214, they're not even halfway through veraison at this point in time. We've been stuck at 19 bricks on Sangiovese for the last 2 weeks at one of our older vineyards. But I think you're right, Chris. I think that it was 100 degrees in Livermore today.
Yeah.
supposed to get cooler through the rest of the week, but those kind of spikes can change things pretty dramatically pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Cameron has grapes that have gone through veraison.
yeah. There you go. I like it.
So who won the election?
So Wood won the election.
Interesting.
And not shocking to me, given that most of our club members are California folks. And there's a California, people in California generally like the effect of wood. In this case, it was more of a textural effect. It wasn't, I use this word organoleptic. Organoleptic means kind of the way it tastes and the way it smells.
It's a very fancy word that I'm going to start incorporating into my lexicon.
It's just, I talk too much as it is. I try to make
I'm
it.
feeling very organoleptic right
There
now.
you go. Yes, you are very organoleptic. So, this wine is a really interesting study for us in how variable the wines can be when you make small changes, or when you make definitive changes. 24 vintage will be Morganson Vineyard for the Element series. So we're going to do it again, different clone, different vineyard. And we're also going to make a wine that we call Rock. So that was what the Rock was, this concrete aged wine. That's what we called it. We're going to do a wine that you'll be able to find in restaurants hopefully in Southern California relatively soon. Because I think that there's something about the way that Cab Franc and this particular Cab Franc vineyard or vineyards in Livermore react with concrete. Very excited again. You have to be able to sell wine. You have to be able to differentiate yourself from other folks, and we want to differentiate ourselves in getting closer and closer and closer to the fundamental aspect of what Cab Franc is from our growing area. And I think that the vessel adds a lot of truth, as it were, to what the variety can be. And I love texturally what concrete does. I think this wine's a very interesting wine, and I think it's a great food wine. And there's just something about the sort of knees and elbows of the wine right now structurally. It's not a soft wine. There's a lot of knees and elbows. There's the angles. It's an angular wine right now.
Well, I imagine that's the stainless and the concrete.
Indeed.
Because again, there's no sanding off of the
That's
rough
right.
edges.
That's right.
You're getting the full expression of those grapes.
Absolutely.
Even with the concrete, whatever is imparted and pulled out from there, you're still getting a lot of harshness. By the way, not to again step on your marketing, but Cab Franc is right there.
Like we're gonna talk in a few days when I get back.
Like this is what I do.
I like it. It's beautiful.
No, it's so interesting, and it's like, so I'm fascinated. Wood won, but you're still leaning into the you're gonna do the blend again. But are you gonna make individual versions of it? Is it one of those experiments that you see is worthwhile to continue, or is it like, has there been kind of a rejection of the other two in favor of the wood that you kind of lean into?
No. In fact, I think that the 23, so that again, from a price standpoint, just say the 22 that we had today, the 23 version of that wine had a bit of concrete, a bit of steel, and a bit of because the vessels were larger than the amount of wine we produced for the Elements series, right? So we made a blend, and the blend was Cresta Blanca, where the rosé and white comes from, and Guillemette, which is where the Elements series came from and where the 22 came from. So two different vineyards, two different clones of Cab Franc, different ways of aging the wines as well. And then just the inherent qualities of 23 are going to allow us to further our own knowledge about what works from a production standpoint, what we age in, what vineyards become more prominent than others, or what have you. I will say that I really believe in the concept of rock as not only as a way of identifying our brand, but more importantly,
let's go with Franc from now on, because you should trademark that.
Franc. There you go. Yes. Prufrock. I'm counting my life in Cab Franc bottles.
J. Alfred, yes.
Yes. Um, but also in just the overall, just sensory loveliness that particular way of aging wines gives you. So, every year is a different vintage. Every year is a different story, and we try to write the story as early on in the process as we can, and let it have a life of its own. And with the idea that we're trying to create something that's pure, something that is purely Cab Franc to be certain,
Mhm.
and something that ends up being interesting and delicious for people. Um,
Yeah.
I'm sort of reading through some of the
No, that's okay. Yeah. So
yeah,
Stacy loves the angles, but she wants to know how long she can hold this, when you think it's going to mellow and soften out a bit. And then Cameron was commenting about how it's has the lightest color of all of those, which I imagine comes from that stainless and concrete, where you're
right,
the true color of it. You're not picking up any of the coloration from the barrel, the
right.
char. And was there any filtering or fining that went into the wine?
So no filtering or lie. No fining. The elements, the element series. Trying to think of what the element. No, none of the wines were filtered. We
Okay.
we bottled. We made 20 cases of each of rock, steel, and wood, and 100
Oh wow.
cases of elements. So we did it at a buddy of ours in Livermore, a small little bottling line, like a
Yeah.
4-spout bottling line, all hand stuff. No filtration there. All of our wines generally go through cross flow filtration because we don't want Brett. We don't want those other aspects of things that we can control.
Right.
But that are also very much more gentle than going through pad filtration and that kind of stuff. I think that I think over the course of a year or two, you're going to see, and it's happened with the 23 Livermore Valley Cab Franc already. Um, the wines have gotten rounder and more integrated in the course of 5 or 6 or 7 months in bottle. I think with a year or so, a lot of those shoulders, the ankle, the knees and stuff that we talk about being sanded off become sanded off. The elements itself, I'm not sure, given the way um, the individual bottles, steel and rock and wood, have changed over time with being in bottle. Uh, there's always going to be a little bit of a leanness and austerity to this particular release that won't be mimicked by the wines that you'll have most access to over the course of the next year or so. We're working on finding a distribution in Southern California as we speak. And the wines that you will
We
have.
should talk about that,
Yeah, well,
because I'm doing the same.
okay, well, great. I mean, we've got one LA County distributor that's looking at things right now. They're out in the marketplace with the wines. And really for us, it's the white Cab Franc Blanc and then the Livermore Valley. So
Right.
the 23 version of the 22 we tasted today will be the wine you'll be able to find in the next 60 days, let's say, in Southern California.
As you know, not the best time to be looking for a distributor.
Well, unfortunately, we were with the distributor that decided to
Right.
pull up stakes.
Yes,
And
right. Yeah.
so there's 2,500 of us that are looking for
Right.
distribution.
That's why a new brand
not
looking is sort of
Yeah.
like not the right time.
no,
And everything else about the wine business is so easy, right?
right.
Yeah.
But if you're doing something new and unique and they look at it and go, I can sell this, then
Yes. Well,
you have opportunities.
that's what we think.
Yeah,
we have.
except that
Exactly.
restaurants are closing right and left and buyers are not buying.
Allison,
People are already
stop
going.
with the negativity. Seriously.
for
I'm being
Jesus' sake.
realistic. I'm being
Yeah.
realistic.
Realism is for
buzzkill.
when I get out of
Jesus.
vacation.
Yeah.
I mean, I sent out an email to a bunch of somms the other day. I can't tell you how many restaurants have closed and how many have moved on and don't even know who's filled the position. It's really kind of
Scary.
Yeah.
scary out there.
All right.
It
So
is.
let's get back to the wine. Stephen,
Yes.
I want to be a Pollyanna about this. So yes,
Please. Thank you.
Yes. What were we talking about? The
Hopelessly
elements?
optimistic and wine. So I
Exactly.
would just go ahead.
No, I can't remember what we were talking about. So go ahead.
I think just talking about kind of, I think that ultimately for us at the Steven Kent Winery, our goal is to become the preeminent producer of Cab Franc in the country. We really believe, we really believe we
We accept the royal we here, so it's fine.
well, and when I say we, I'm talking about my family. I'm talking about my wife and my son and I. I'm talking about our and the folks who work with us. Um, we believe 1,000,000% in Cab Franc. We believe that there is more Cabernet Sauvignon than anybody ever needs, more Chardonnay than anybody ever needs, more
Right.
Pinot Noir than anybody ever needs. That there's a variety out there that fills all of these beautiful niches in terms of food compatibility, in terms of just flat out sexy gorgeousness and deliciousness and complexity and lower price points and lower alcohol and a group of people of the oldest winemaking family in the country, which is what my family is, 1,000% devoted to bringing as much beauty and honesty and emotional connection from a grape as we can. That, there are, I don't know how many wineries, 7,000 wineries in California or whatever the number is at this point in time. Uh,
Right.
we've been doing this longer than anybody else in California, and we believe in the ability of wine to change people's lives, to add, to add deliciousness and complexity to people's daily life, to assuage concerns, to help slough off the daily cares. We all need that these days,
Oh, yeah.
no matter what your political stripe might be. Um, and to honor a beverage that connects us all. I mean, I'm 700 miles away from where you guys are right now, and we've had, I hope, an interesting 2 hours and a fun 2 hours
Oh, yeah.
talking about something that is not only just delicious, but something that gets into your bones, that gets into your that that plucks these emotional strings. And for me, that's what this is all about. Right?
Yeah.
There are easier ways to lose money
Stephen,
than the
were
wine
you
business.
what came first in the cart versus the horse? You've been in Livermore a long time. Were you looking for a grape to be that leader? Did you fall in love with Cab Franc in Livermore, or Cab Franc and hoped it worked in Livermore? Like, was it just the stars aligning, or was there sort of a push from the start that you were always hoping? I mean, in your mind,
Great. It's a great question.
because you've been in the wild for a while, and you made the argument at the very beginning, every region should sort of hang their hat. Most regions hang their hat on one or two varieties.
Right.
And it helps them market as a region, and that's
Yeah.
very true.
Yeah.
At Santa Barbara, it's their biggest Achilles
Sure.
heel, is that they're so good at everything and can't really hang their hat on
Absolutely. Ask
anything.
Washington State,
Yeah.
Yeah.
same
So,
problem.
so
Right.
the question is, like, what was it? Just all these things conjoining, or were there other grapes that you championed before Cab Franc? Was there what? Why
So
here now?
it's a great
How'd
question.
you win finally?
It's a
Well,
great
and
question.
let me tag something onto that because
Yeah.
it's a great question. Do you find that as you bang the drum, you're finding more followers behind you? Because the fact is, you can be a leader in a grape, but if you don't get consensus mass behind you to follow along and help you establish that
You
as the
did
grape
get
of choice,
Livermore to declare it the primary grape.
I did get that. So
right?
it's,
But if you
it's
if you
another great question, Chris, because I could be the Pinotage king, and
right,
who wants to drink
you
Pinotage?
you could be the guy screaming that
Yes,
Tempranillo is the only grape that we should be growing in Livermore. But if you're the
exactly,
only one doing Tempranillo or
exactly,
Chuzao or whatever it is, if you can't
absolutely,
convince, and unfortunately, Livermore's, and we talked about this, is Livermore has always been the 2,000-pound gorillas
right,
of Wente and Concannon, and then
right,
everybody else. So if
right.
you can't convince the gorillas to move into the realm that you're looking for, it's a fraught cause.
It is indeed, and it keeps me up at night. It wakes me up in the morning. Um, to answer Allison's question first, my dad and I started Steven Kent Winery with Cabernet Sauvignon. We, knowing the history of the valley, knowing the history of the Concannon clones of Cab, knowing the history of greatness with the white Bordeaux varieties, you should be able to grow great Cabernet Sauvignon. We wanted to make one wine we thought could compete with Napa and Sonoma. 1996, our first vintage of Cabernet Sauvignon. it really was the Gilmedi vineyard that coming into production with all of the different grapes that offered us the possibility of migrating or augmenting Cabernet Sauvignon. That being said, I wandered into the Kermit Lynch wine shop in Berkeley in 2000 and started tasting Beaudry and Breton and some of the other great Loire Valley producers they had there, and my mind was absolutely blown. It was, what the hell is this? How do they do that? How is this so pure? How is this so delineated? How is this so much about the fruit and the savory qualities of the herbs and not the wood? That, and I was younger then than I am now, and a lot, well, maybe a little bit stupider than I am now. It just the scales fell from the eyes. Holy cow! Let's look for every example of Cab Franc we can find. Gilmedi comes to production 2005, 2006. We start making some Cab Franc, small volumes. I start drinking a lot more, reading a lot more, making a lot more mistakes, and and stuff like that, where it became, I didn't grow up in Chinon. So there's no family legacy. In fact, I talked to my dad about this. There was no legacy at all at Mirassou for Cabernet Franc. We didn't have any growing anywhere. And so it wasn't a family thing either. It was purely a function of my own, my own
Your drive. We're not going to call it hard-headedness. We're going to call it drive.
Right. But my own internal aesthetic appreciation for what wine can do, married to this particular grape that worked really well, that gave me that thing, married to this region that produces such beautiful versions of this thing. And, now it's a function of going from, one winery, ours, the Mirassou family's winery, in the Cab Franc Guild, to 20 wineries, to Livermore Valley Wine Growers Association naming Cab Franc as its red signature variety, as Cab Francapalooza having 50 wineries from all around the world and 100 plus wines in Livermore celebrating the variety, the most diverse Cab Franc wine festival in the world in Little Livermore. There's and everywhere I go, oh, you're the Cab Franc guy. That's awesome. I love that. I love that the effort, the 24-hour a day effort, 365-day effort is moving people towards something that's aesthetically beautiful. And
can I tell you something, Stephen?
Yes.
I'll tell you this as an outsider who knows you, but has met many winemakers in the area. And if you go to winesoundtrack.com, you'll see how many Livermore winemakers I have interviewed, because they have me come up and do like 10 interviews in a weekend. So I've interviewed probably 20 winemakers. And I will tell you, the only winemakers who have not jumped on the Cab Franc bandwagon or made sort of a snarky remark, but sort of rolled their eyes at this Livermore Valley declaring it and Steven Kent bangs his drum, are the people who only have Cabernet Sauvignon planted in their vineyard and don't buy any fruit.
Right.
They were the only ones who were sort of like, I don't know about this being the direction we go in, because they're so locked in their ways.
Right.
So they're a little slower to change. But everybody else who buys fruit or who, is doing replanting, whatever, was fully on board and excited by it.
It's the Finestras and the Rios Lavelles out there. So.
Well, Finestra, actually, Aaron Luna is making some really beautiful Cab Franc.
Good.
I want to be authentic about believe me, I've been doing, this is my 30th harvest. So I've been in the business for a long time. Family's been in the business for a long time. I understand it's not just about picking fruit and making wine. You have to be able to sell this stuff, right? And if one of the gifts I can give to Livermore Valley when my career is over, hopefully it's a long time from now, is that I helped to give some visibility and identity to the region. It deserves it. It's a world-class growing area, and it's been just a bunch of it's been a bunch of small wineries kind of doing their own thing, which is fine. But if you want to be able to give your kids and your grandkids an opportunity in the business, you have to have a vibrant growing area. There's got to be a reason for people to go there. And I think this is not, I didn't invent this. This is not rocket science. If every other grape growing region in the world has defined by a small number of grapes, like we talked about earlier, why don't we do something that is, why don't we have the same structural kind of understanding about the business, the marketing and sales side of the business and visibility side of the business, and grow the most amazing grape in the world that happens to grow so beautifully in our area and make really gorgeous wine from it, and hopefully bring more people in, which I think we're seeing already. So I'm really happy. I'm happy for 2 seconds and then it's on to the next thing, but I'm really happy for the next 2 seconds about where
I've
we
been
are
to
now.
Livermore, and I will say it's not, a hop, skip, and a jump for those of us in Southern California, but
Right.
it's a really easy drive from Oakland Airport.
Absolutely. Or San
Easy
Jose.
3 hours from Paso
Yeah,
Robles.
that's
So
right.
You're the only one from Paso.
that's true. But
For
Stephen,
all
I
of
think
us
we're
down south.
Stephen, we're about to lose you from darkness, and Patty's pretty
I
much
know, I
asleep
apologize.
on
Yes.
us, which doesn't look great. So two quick things. One, I want you to talk a little bit about the book you wrote, just to
Yes.
tie back into your your literary history, your literary education. And
Yeah.
then we'll talk a little bit about, if folks want to pick up more wines from you, how they can best do so. How they can come visit you and do a tasting of your
I
wines.
appreciate that, Chris. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. So I wrote a book. In 2021 that is available on Amazon, available at the winery on my website. That's about sort of ostensibly about the Mirassou family history, and the history of Livermore Valley winemaking, but really is more about, it's a sort of love story, a paean to what it means to be a winemaker, to be in the vineyard as you're harvesting, to be in the winery as you're shepherding these beautiful.
Saved by the Light.
Saved by the Light. Thank you,
Yes.
John. Um, uh, uh, as you're shepherding wines through from crush and fermentation to bottling and the like. I am in the mid. I'm nearly done. If I can find 2 months of time, I'll have my Cab Franc book written, which is about a Cab Franc and kind of family history and what it means to the Mirassou family to be Cab Franc producers. I write a lot. I have a Substack called Wine Saves Lives. If you're interested, write a lot about, do videos, all that kind of stuff about winemaking, about Cab Franc, that sort of thing. StevenKent.com to buy wine. We would love to have all of you folks come up to see us at some point in time. Livermore is a beautiful spot. It's magical. A lot of great people, a lot of really great wine, a lot of great food, small, and burgeoning. So I've seen 30 years of change in Livermore, and we're headed in the beautiful and right direction, I think.
There is a great new restaurant there, so similar to, almost as good as Guantonio's in Lodi, which is the best restaurant. I don't know how it's in Lodi because it could go anywhere.
More so than Wine and Roses?
Oh no, Guantonio's is, wood fire pizzas, seasonal menus. That restaurant, if you stuck it in Paso, in New York City, in LA, it's a phenomenal restaurant.
Good to know, because I always thought Pietro's was the second best restaurant.
But Livermore has a lot of the chain hotels, but there's the Purple Orchid, which is a lovely hotel right in wine country. A lot of the wineries in Livermore do outdoor concerts and parties, and I went to Cab Francapalooza this summer.
You did. We were so happy to see you.
It's a super fun event. There's even a winery from Texas there.
That's right. There's New York, there's Oregon and Washington, California, Loire Valley, Italy. There's all nice. And we love seeing you there. May 31st, 2026, next Cab Francapalooza. We'd love to see everybody come.
Put it in your calendars. So yeah, and StevenKent.com to pick up any of the wines, the Blanc Franc, the Franc Blanc, excuse me.
Even there's a Kentucky winery making Cab Franc. Are they growing the grapes there?
There's Cab Franc grown in most places, and I would love to experiment. We got New Jersey Cab Franc. So there's
Canadian Cab Franc.
Yeah,
definitely the
beautiful.
Okanagan.
Beautiful.
Canadian doesn't surprised me. Kentucky surprises
Yeah,
me.
that's a little surprising.
It's one of the most, it's because
Pennsylvania.
it needs a short growing period and you can kind
That's
of
right.
cover it and
Virginia.
keep it from frost. Oh yeah, Virginia ones are great. So
Absolutely.
yeah. Stacy wanted to know, have you tasted the Cab Franc wines from other places? Do you have any interesting?
Do you mean in Livermore Valley, Stacy, or
I
anywhere?
assume she meant other states around the country. Like, do you have any preferences? You know, we mentioned Virginia, we mentioned upstate New
Virginia,
York, the Finger
uh,
Lakes. Yeah.
yeah, Finger Lakes, I think, are making great wines. I think you can find some beautiful examples of Cab Franc from Southern Oregon. Michigan, interestingly enough, making
Oh,
some really nice wines. I think that Cab Franc from I would start with the Loire Valley.
yeah.
I think that's kind of again the sort of purest expression of Cab Franc that I can think of outside of Livermore Valley, and uh, uh, but the wines from Virginia are spectacular. The couple that I've had from New Jersey have been delicious. Hungary, Bulgari in Italy, and
Hungary.
there's northeastern part of Italy also growing Cab Franc. So it's not it's the sixth most widely planted red grape in France. So it's not that you can't find it. It's usually a blending grape, but there are any number of great sources for the wines. And if you subscribe to Wine Saves Lives, I'll talk more about individual wineries as we go forward.
I had one, Stephen, the other night from Humboldt County.
Well, it's interesting. What was it called? Do you remember?
It was the Joseph Jewell, Humboldt County. I mean, he does a lot of Pinot Noirs and
Yeah.
Pinot is what you usually think
Right.
of, but this was a cool climate Cab Franc and utterly delicious.
Awesome. My friend Joe, who just
And I
came
had it with
from-
barbecue with
There you
a
go.
grilled steak.
There you
So,
go.
yeah, another one of my friends from the coast, from Arcata, he brought Humboldt County Cab Franc for this weekend. So I'm
Nice.
excited about trying that. Different producer.
You typically think of Humboldt for marijuana or Pinot.
Well, you know, they both have herbal green notes to them, so it
Yeah.
kind of makes sense. I get
You know,
it.
I just realized. So hi, Stacy. I didn't
You
see
talked
your
with
last name.
Stacy for like 2 hours at the Festival for Forgotten
Yes,
Grapes. You and Stacy are like
I
BFFs at this
did,
point.
and
Yeah.
it's good to thank you for being on the Zoom, Stacy. I hope you're doing well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Perfect. So I think at
We
this
won't
point,
be yeah. So I hate to cut out, but I'm
you've
losing
got
my
to
battery
eat. You've
here,
got to go eat ribs or
and I've
whatever
got
it
dinner
is, and
coming
drink
on.
all the other Cab Franc. So thank
Indeed.
you so much, Stephen, for being
Cheers.
here again.
Thank
If
your
you're
friends for
interested,
their patience.
StevenKent.com is where you go to pick up any of the wines we had tonight.
Right.
You also do some great cabs and a few other fantastic wines there. So
Thank you so much.
so much for being here, Stephen. We
Appreciate it.
appreciate
Thank you so much,
And
guys. I hope you had a
we're
good
going
time.
to cut it short, everybody. So thank you. We'll see you next month. We've
Cheers.
got Stoltman. Stoltman
Awesome.
Wines is going to be our featured winery. So that should be pretty exciting. Great Santa Barbara fruit. We will see you all then. So have a great night, everybody. Take care. Thanks for being here.